at this.
Yes.
They treat this like it's some common cookie.
Yes.
Can't be God right here.
Right. I took a friend to church, a Catholic church. The first takeaway was that he says, wow, this is very similar to our service. Okay.
Jesus 911.
Jesus 911, where iron sharpens iron and one man sharpens another. We're talking about communion in the hand and the truth about it. So we're not trying to diminish anyone's belief in the real presence. We're trying to encourage it and encourage and strengthen their belief in the real presence. And it's our opinion, I think that Jessica would agree with me, that since the time that this has been introduced, there has been a diminishing of the laity's belief in the real presence, and we're shown by
Ruben, it's been a disaster.
But yeah,
hey, I'll make it simple. That's a simple word. It's been a disaster. Okay, before Holy Communion in the hand, 75% of Catholics went to Holy Mass on Sunday in the United States. Today, with this experiment, let's just call it what it is, this experiment of communion in the hand, 21% of Catholics go to Holy Mass on Sundays. You know why? Because you can give people all the arguments on the real presence, the miracles of the Eucharist, John chapter 6, typology from the Old Testament, the church fathers, but then what they see with their eyeballs every Sunday at Mass doesn't equate to all the catechesis on the fathers of the church,
Absolutely.
On the Greek, on the Old and New Testament parallels, on John chapter 6, verse by verse, on all the Council of Trent's verses. All that doesn't mean a hill of beans, Ruben, when they see the way the Holy Eucharist is treated every Sunday at Mass. And then the average Catholic says, wait a minute, I know what Jesse says and Ruben says and my dad and my mom and my grandfather, but look at this.
Yes.
They treat this like it's some common cookie.
Yes.
Can't be God right here.
Right. I took a friend to church, a Catholic church, Nova Sordo, way back when, and he, this is back when we worked together.
He wasn't impressed.
He's a Methodist. And, you know, the first takeaway was that he says, wow, this is very similar to our service. Okay, that's the first thing he said. He's a deputy sheriff, detective, and and
you're trying to evangelize.
And he's trying to, be,
open,
just looking around and just be an honest opinion. And he says, well, if you guys really believe, and that's Jesus, then why is everybody handling it? Why are these other people who aren't priests giving it out?
Wow.
And he says that right there, it doesn't show a consistency in what you believe, because when you receive on your knees, right, and receive on the tongue, it's an outward reflection of an inward manifestation or inward disposition. And so he hit the nail on the head. I was going, exactly, precisely. That's how I feel. I told him the same thing. I go, I know, it's an abuse. It's got to stop. Anyway.
Ruben, there's a term, there's terms. The term calls orthodoxy, which means correct teaching, and orthopraxy, which means correct postures, correct, the correct physical gestures.
Yes.
And so our orthopraxy with this communion in the hand is not congruent with our orthodoxy, the teachings of the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. It's just not.
Yeah.
Because Protestants stand up for their communion services and pass it around to each other in a plate in the hand.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Is that
Ruben? I had a High Church Lutheran tell me he came. I invited him to Holy Mass in Nova Sordo, and he said, "You know what? Our communion services are more reverent than yours." I said, "What do you mean?"
Shoot.
He goes, "I go to a high church, a high church Lutheran church.
Okay,
pipe organ. The old sacred songs from the reformers. And he said, we receive on our knees on an altar rail at the High Lutheran Church. I mean, Ruben, in my mind, it's talk about, drop the mic moment.
Yeah.
I couldn't even respond to him.
Yep, I know what you mean. And to think about it, just the times in history where communion in the hand began during the Arian heresy, because they were denying that Jesus was equal to God the Father, and so they were receiving it on the hand. But 90% of the priests and bishops had gone astray. And then in the 1600s, when the Protestant revolt came about, and the Protestants were doing it so that they can show, we don't believe in what you papists believe, and we are going to receive it this way to show that it's just a wafer. And they didn't believe in the transubstantiation. Now the problem I have, a lot of problems I have with this, but one of the problems is that people can do some misdeeds with it.
Simple. It's very simple.
The article relates that a deacon is just giving his observations. He saw a mother take the communion host back to her toddler in the pew and share it with him like a cookie. He says at least
all the time.
At least 4 or 5 times a year, he has to stop someone just to take the host who wants to wander away with it and ask them to consume it on the spot. You always twice a month you find people that drop it. These are maybe well-intentioned folks, but somehow they drop the host or it slides out of their hand and Jesus tumbles to the floor. And that's not to mention all the particles. Every particle contains the real Jesus. So when you're putting in your hands, and 100% of the people do not come with clean hands. Let's just be honest. You're saying goodbye to the dog at the door. Hey, I'll be back. I'm going to church.
Picking your nose in the car.
So your hands aren't going to be clean a good majority of the time. So that's why they should always use patens underneath the chin. And
Ruben, also, I know people that say that after Holy Mass or clean up the church, they find the Holy Eucharist in hymnals. They find it under the pew. They find it in the bathroom and in the parking lot. And let me just mention one thing. In the Old Testament, there's a powerful story where the Ark of the Covenant, it contained the presence of God. God would basically land on the Ark of the Covenant in a glory cloud.
Right.
And the Ark was falling one day as the Levites were in procession. And a layman named Uzzah, he goes, oh no, the ark's going to fall down. It's going to hit the ground. I can't let the Ark of the Covenant fall. It's a sacred box. Mm-hmm. So he went down to stop the ark from hitting the ground. And the Bible says that God struck him dead. You know why? I'll tell you. Well, you know why, but because he was not a priest.
Yes.
And only the Levites were allowed to engage in liturgical affairs. And the Ark of the Covenant was like the tabernacle. It contained the presence of God. Only the Levites could handle the Ark of the Tabernacle. And in fact, the Levites, they handled the Ark of the Tabernacle by holding it in procession. They weren't like touching it themselves. Mm-hmm. And a lay person, Uzzah, well-intentioned lay guy, was struck dead by God because he did a priestly action. And I'll be honest with you, Ruben, so many good lay Catholics don't realize it, and it's not their fault because they're being allowed to do this, but this offends God.
Yes.
The fact that a layperson's hands are not consecrated. Let me say it again.
That's right.
You didn't get on your face and you weren't ordained and you didn't have holy oil put all over your hands and the bishop lay hands on you who's a successor of the apostles. That didn't happen to me or to you or to my wife or anybody else I know. It only happens to priests.
Yep.
And there's a big difference. And this is why up until these Holland and Belgium and German liberals, until they bucked the Vatican, and they basically said, you know what? If you don't give us an indult, we're going to do it anyhow. So phooey to you. We don't care what you say. And the Pope at that point says, well, I want to try to keep the church unified. I'm the Pope. For the sake of unity, for pastoral expediency, I'm going to just give make this indult perpetual. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Then you have all the liberals around the country saying, what about us? What about us in the U.S.? How come you let the Belgium and Holland and French bishops and German bishops give communion in the hand? Then the Canadian liberals jump in. And all over the world, the left started complaining, the Bernardines and, the Deardens and stuff and the Mahoneys. And so it just became kind of mainstream practice. You let the toothpaste out of the bottle. You can't put it back in.
Yep, that's right. So,
Ruben, we may have to continue this next week, but we'll go as far as we can right now because there's a lot to this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, well, I'm gonna have to go off memory because I just lost power here, but it's okay. The thing that's striking is that